Welcome back to Monitors Unboxed. Today I'm reviewing one of the cheapest high refresh rate 1440p monitors on the market, the Gigabyte M27Q3. This is effectively a successor to the highly popular Gigabyte M27QX that I reviewed several years ago, bringing a high 240Hz refresh rate down to an even lower price point. In fact, we get a double benefit here because this isn't actually a 240Hz monitor, it's a 300Hz display with an overclock mode that brings it up to a maximum of 320Hz. So the M27Q3 is set to be faster and cheaper than before. Gigabyte are continuing to use a 27-inch 1440p IPS LCD panel in this series with no real HDR hardware. It is Display HDR 400 certified, but with no local dimming capabilities. It is really an SDR-only product. It does, however, include features that high-speed gamers would desire, like adaptive sync with G-Sync compatible certification and backlight strobing. As of right now, the M27Q3 is set to have a $270 US MSRP. That should be the actual price, including tariffs, though Gigabyte tell me it could change as it hasn't launched in the US yet. Locally for us in Australia, it's available now at a $460 MSRP, so about equivalent to the US price, but it is initially being sold for just $360, which is about $220 US accounting for tax. Really cheap for a 300 plus Hertz monitor. But even at $270 US, it slots in cheaper than competitors like the LG 27GR83Q, and it's nearly half the M27QX's launch price of $500 US back in 2022, so it'll be interesting to see how it stacks up. Gigabyte's M series has received a new design for 2025, and this also applies to LCDs like the M27Q3. The wide V-shaped base has been replaced with a small, thin, six-sided metal plate. The smaller footprint occupies less desk space, so you can use a broader range of keyboard orientations with this monitor, and the flat profile means you can put things on top of the base, further maximizing usable space. The stand pillar is a metal tube with a relatively small diameter, but again it's very sturdy and still allows for a wide range of ergonomic adjustment, including height, tilt, swivel and pivot. The maximum height on offer is acceptable without being outstanding. I think the whole stand assembly, the base, the pillar and everything looks excellent and is a big upgrade on previous Gigabyte monitors. The display section itself is dominated by the LCD panel on the front with the chin along the bottom edge, including a large Gigabyte logo. The rear is made of black plastic and features a boxy design similar to what you see in OLEDs, but a bit thicker to accommodate the larger LCD screen. Gigabyte's design uses a range of different lines and vents and stuff which looks fine enough. There's no RGB LED lighting here. The port selection is great. We get one DisplayPort 1.4 with DSC, two HDMI 2.1 48 gigabits per second ports, and a USB-C supporting DP-Alt mode and 18 watts of power delivery. Paired with these display inputs is a 2-port USB 5 gigabits per second hub and an audio jack. This combination of ports has good refresh rate support. Gigabyte using HDMI 2.1 instead of 2.0 found on some other high refresh rate 1440p displays means it does actually support the full 320Hz over HDMI, though at 8-bit as DSC is not used. 4K 60Hz downscaling is also supported, a nice bonus for non-PC inputs. The OSD on this monitor is controlled through a directional toggle and includes lots of features like separate display modes, lots of gaming specific features, crosshairs, shadow boosting, FPS counters, and other information readouts. It's a fast and easy to navigate interface, which is always nice to see. The M27Q3 uses a matte screen coating, which is standard for IPS LCDs and continues to be the best choice for this technology in 2025. It does a decent job of diffusing light and preventing direct reflections, and the level of grain is standard, so clarity is still pretty good. As a monitor designed for speed, response time performance is important, so let's take a look at that now. Gigabyte offer 5 settings, the first of which is off, showing native panel performance. This is a very typical IPS result, around 10 milliseconds with no overshoot. Picture quality improves that to 6.6 milliseconds, but refresh compliance falls short of what is required to properly support the 320Hz refresh rate. The bounce mode is better at 4.5 milliseconds on average, decent refresh compliance, and a low level of overshoot. Cumulative deviation in the low 300 range is excellent. The speed mode pushes things too far, and we get noticeable overshoot in this configuration. The best mode to use though is Smart OD, which uses proper variable overdrive. At 320Hz we get performance very similar to the bounce mode, which is very good for gaming at this refresh rate. As we lower the refresh rate in the variable refresh mode, performance holds up nicely. The monitor is still very fast at 240Hz with a 4.3 millisecond average response and very little overshoot. At 144Hz, the monitor is dialing things back a little bit to still provide 4.9 milliseconds on average with an acceptable level of overshoot. Below this, variable overdrive pulls back on the response speed further to limit overshoot. So at 100 Hz, we see a 5.6 millisecond average, and at 60 Hz, we see a 7 millisecond average. But all refresh rates are relatively artifact-free and have good compliance. This is a great result, as a couple of years ago Gigabyte were releasing LCD monitors with Smart OD modes that made bizarre and suboptimal choices. The M27Q3 is really well tuned in comparison, and we end up with a great single overdrive mode experience. You can set and forget the Smart OD setting. At 320Hz, the M27Q3 is a very solid performer. At a 4.5 millisecond average with minimal overshoot, we're outperforming a lot of other 1440p IPS LCDs, including previous 240Hz models like the 27GR83Q and M27QX. Performance is in the ballpark of the Asus XG27AQMR from a few years back, another 300Hz monitor with variable overdrive. This combination of response time and overshoot numbers leads to a better cumulative deviation figure than usual, again matching the AQMR. This result is 30% better than the 27GR83Q, which is pretty substantial and indicative of a better panel. Average performance is very good as well. The M27Q3 is more in among the pack. You'll see the numbers here are not massively different to the 27GR83Q and XG27AQMR, but still pretty good when paired with the knowledge that it has a single overdrive mode experience. In cumulative deviation, the M27Q3 once again pulls ahead because of this, delivering a 17% better result than LG's 240Hz IPS LCD while matching the AQMR. This makes the M27Q3 one of the best tuned 1440p LCDs on the market. At fixed refresh rates like 120Hz, the M27Q3 offers a good experience, though it isn't notably ahead of other LCDs, so the speed advantage it has is largely constrained to higher refresh rates. Similar at 60Hz, nothing overly special about this monitor here, though it still performs acceptably. Gigabyte offer backlight strobing through their aim stabilizer sync technology, which works both with and without adaptive sync enabled. However, there are no other settings, so you can't control strobe length or timing, and brightness is locked. It works down to a refresh rate of 100 Hz. There's a few issues with this implementation. When used with VRR enabled, aim stabilizer sync is not a very significant improvement in clarity. At most refresh rates below 320 Hz, it has a very similar level of blur to not using it. When you disable VRR and just use the feature without the sync part, clarity is better and there is an advantage to using it, especially at high refreshes. But there is noticeable strobe crosstalk and red fringing, so enabling strobing reduces blur but also introduces artifacts. I prefer to use this monitor without strobing. Input lag is excellent with a processing delay of just 0.3 milliseconds and a high 320Hz refresh rate that reduces refresh lag. This screen feels very fast to use at 320Hz. Now, is a 320Hz monitor like this a significant improvement upon 240Hz competitors? With just a 33% higher refresh rate, it's more of a minor difference, though it is better in terms of responsiveness and clarity. You'll notice a much larger improvement coming from a 165Hz monitor though, as the M27Q3's 320Hz refresh rate is nearly twice as fast. Power consumption, nothing crazy, but is on the higher end of a typical 27-inch IPS LCD range, using about 18% more power than the M27QX. The M27Q3 is a wide gamut monitor sporting 96% coverage of DCI-P3, which is a pretty typical number for an IPS LCD that does not use a quantum dot layer. Total Rec 2020 color space coverage is typical at 76%, so that's not all that different to other higher refresh 1440p monitors that I've tested. Default out-of-the-box performance is average. My unit had a slight red tint affecting white balance, but pretty good adherence to 2.2 gamma, leading to an average delta E result. The display does not use sRGB emulation out of the box, so there is some oversaturation affecting the color results, again typical among gaming monitors. When we compare these results to other gaming monitors, factory performance is in the middle to lower parts of the charts, so a pretty average experience here. There's a couple of ways to improve performance in the SDR mode. One is to enable Windows 11 Auto Color Management, which uses information the display reports to emulate sRGB at the OS level. This reduces oversaturation and improves color results, though it doesn't impact grayscale numbers. It's a good choice to use because it doesn't lock any of the OSD settings, and accuracy is pretty good while falling slightly short of what I deem factory calibration, a delta E average under 5. The color primaries Gigabyte report are solid, so we get full sRGB coverage. The other way is through the built-in sRGB mode, which locks some settings like white balance. This configuration does little to address the red tint, so the color temperature is still slightly off, but gamma becomes more accurate. This mode is reasonable at emulating sRGB, so we don't get oversaturation, but again, it falls short of proper factory calibration. Compared to other monitors using their sRGB modes, the M27Q3 doesn't improve its position much relative to factory results. This is still an average to below average level of accuracy, falling short of the M27QX and some of Gigabyte's best 1440p displays, like the M27QA. However, it's not that different to other 240Hz products like the 27GR83Q, so it's not a bad result, it's just not a major strength of this monitor. Calibration can be improved through a full software ICC profile, which I created using Calman. The results here are very good thanks to a wide color gamut and decent factory gamma performance, so this is a great candidate for calibration like this. Maximum brightness is average, coming in at 434 nits, which is right around the mark of other IPS LCDs. The 27GR83Q is 12% brighter, but we're getting a better result than the XG27AQMR, and much better results than most OLEDs. Minimum brightness is average at 57 nits. This IPS LCD's contrast ratio is typical for modern releases at 1262:1. It's good to confirm this is not one of those IPS panels with a very low contrast ratio like we see from, say, the M27QP, but again, contrast performance is not overly different to the 27GR83Q, and it falls behind better products like the MSI G274QPX. In general, IPS LCDs have poor black levels and a bad contrast ratio, especially compared to VA LCDs and OLEDs, so this is not the panel technology you'd choose if you want the deepest blacks. Products like the AOC Q27G3XMN also have the benefit of offering proper mini LED local dimming, which supports true HDR. Viewing angles on the M27Q3 are fine and better than you'd see on VA LCDs, but probably a bit below average compared to the standard IPS crop. You won't have too many issues viewing this display as intended in the center, but at off angles there can be a bit of brightness fall off. Uniformity, again, pretty average. The center section of the display is fine, but we aren't getting full edge-to-edge uniformity with a bit of fall off around the outer sides. In the Essentials checklist, Gigabyte generally do an okay job of advertising this display, getting specifications around brightness and contrast correct. Their big misstep is advertising this as HDR capable with display HDR certification. While it is technically true that the M27Q3 can accept an HDR input signal, the panel lacks local dimming, so it can't display HDR content properly thanks to terrible contrast figures and poor brightness. You should not purchase this display for HDR. The name M27Q3 is pretty good as it's short and relatively easy to remember. It's probably not as solid as it once was, given Gigabyte have flooded the market with many M27Q type products, including the M27QP, the X, the A, and now in 2025 the 3 and 2 variants, but I still appreciate that there aren't tons of pointless letters in the name. In the feature support matrix, this is a typical SDR LCD showing. The one issue that did crop up is the overclocking setting, which allows you to enable a 320Hz refresh rate instead of 300Hz, is always reset to disabled if you disconnect the power, which is slightly annoying in the event of a power outage or some other reason it might be disconnected. It's not a deal breaker though, and Gigabyte otherwise offer a decent feature set, particularly in connectivity. The Gigabyte M27Q3 is a decent, high refresh rate 1440p gaming monitor at what should hopefully be a very attractive price point worldwide. This display is not providing groundbreaking new performance for an IPS LCD at 320Hz, but it's tuned well for speed and brings this level of gaming experience to an even lower price point. The main strength to the M27Q3 is its implementation of variable overdrive, which optimizes response time performance across the entire refresh rate range. This display is fast and relatively clear at 320Hz. It maintains good speed with no artifact concerns in the middle parts of the refresh range, and ultimately delivers a single overdrive mode experience. It's notably faster than some of its 240Hz competitors, both in maximum refresh and transition speed, and is a pleasure to use for SDR gaming. This is balanced out with a color experience that has no significant flaws. Yes, it has an average level of calibration, contrast, and brightness relative to other IPS LCDs, but that's perfectly fine in my opinion. In this sort of price range, I'm not expecting amazing performance in every area, so to match other higher refresh rate 1440p monitors is good enough for me. Gigabyte have done a particularly good job around the edges too. The design is excellent with a height adjustable stand and metal base, there's a good port selection including USB-C and a KVM switch, and we get wide gamut support. This is not a budget monitor that strips everything away to its bare bones. Without factoring in the price, the M27Q3 is one of the best performing 1440p LCDs that I've tested with a refresh rate above 240Hz. If the price was the same as 240Hz monitors I've recommended previously, like the LG 27GR83Q, I would recommend the M27Q3 instead. It has more refresh rate headroom than that LG model, better response tuning, and similar color performance. It's quite competitive with the 300Hz Asus XG27AQMR, which is an older monitor from 2022, but probably the best match to the M27Q3 in overall capabilities. The fact that Gigabyte are targeting a $270 US price point, assuming that is true, elevates this display into great value territory, and I think it would be a clear buy if you are after a 1440p high refresh LCD. The 27G83Q I was just talking about is currently $300, which is as low as that display has been priced. The M27Q3 is better and cheaper. The XG27AQMR is still available, but for $375, again placing the M27Q3 in a better value position. At just $360 Aussie right now, this is also a great deal for Australians, and I think it would continue to be if it goes up to its MSRP of $460. It would basically be the cheapest 1440p 240Hz IPS LCD locally, doing so while providing great performance. I think Gigabyte have nailed this one, and it gets my recommendation. So anyway, that's it for this review. If you do want to support the independent testing that we do here at Monitors Unboxed, the best way to do that is via our Patreon page. Links to that is in the description. If you sign up, you get access to some cool benefits, Discord community, great place to chat about monitors, ICC profiles, and color calibrated settings for the monitors that we test as well. And also, if you do end up buying a monitor based on our recommendations or reviews, we do have links below where you can check pricing and purchase them. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.